Let's start off with your time with Marcus, things that you learned out of that, and what drummers look for in bass players.
Okay, well, me and Marcus go back a long, long way. I met Marcus. I start the very beginning. I was in a band called what was the name of the band? It was a kiddie band, but it was like a funk and Latin jazz band, and we played at the famous Music and Art Performing Arts School in New York City, like at I don't know, it was like fall festival or something, you know what I mean, before like winter break or something. In the audience was a guy named Weldon Irvine. He was the musical director for Nina Simone, and he wrote the song Young, Gifted, and Black. And he came, I'll never forget this as long as I live. He's backstage and he's like, well, yeah, some of my students are Lenny White and Steve Gadd. He started talking about all these great musicians that he had mentored, right? I'm like, wow, I'm blown away. And so he talks to me, he talks to the guitarist, and he talks to the keyboard player. All right, the keyboard player was Terry Burris, and the guitar player was Bobby Broom. So two other great musicians, right?
Real quick, every time you hear me do a play along or tutorial and you hear these cool backing tracks, it's because I'm actually using the stems from the original recording, and the tool I use to get those is called Songmaster Pro. You can find it linked below. It is the learning and practicing musician's assistant. You can make charts, you can get stems, you can do all kinds of stuff. There's a phrase trainer, a key trainer. I swear by it, and you can get it using the link below this video.
And he said, I'm doing this play, and I'd like for you brothers to come and audition, right? So he was kind of making like the kind of thing that Tyler Perry did with Medea. He was doing that like years earlier. So it was very Afrocentric show, black people, kind of show, and it was called Young, Gifted, and Broke, right? And, and had church scenes and the whole 9 yards, and we would like play to mostly church people that they would bus in, right? And it was in Brooklyn and Bed-Stuy, a place called Restoration Plaza and the Billie Holiday Theater. All right, so I go there, and we all read the script, and it was like, we couldn't act, but we could read, right? So we go and we read first. Then the next day, or a couple of days after that, we go back and we're going to play now, right? And it turns out that Marcus Miller Marcus must have been 17, something like that. He was the bass player who was going to be in the house band, and we were all, Weldon played piano, Marcus played bass. We had my man Terry on the other keyboard, my man Bobby on the guitar, and me on the drums. So we were going to be the band for the show as well as be in the show. And Marcus told me this years later, and I must have been about 15 or something like that. And Marcus said when he first saw us, he was like, "Oh man, I know these guys can't play, right?" Then we sat, and we sat down and we played, and it was like, "Oh, they can play, right?" And that same day, like, so we played for a long time. We played, learned the song, it was a rehearsal, kind of jam session kind of thing. And so on that same day, I met the amazing keyboard player Don Blackman, right? He came in, and Weldon said, excuse me, Weldon was like, yeah, check this brother out. I'll play any chord and anything, and he's going to be able to solo, So he did that. And then Marcus's cousin, Denzel Miller, right? Who was more like a McCoy Tyner kind of player, right? He was there. So my mind was blown, right? It was like, wow, who are, all these great musicians, when, growing up in Manhattan, you know, before all this internet, all this stuff, right? So I knew the Bronx because it was close to me, right? But Brooklyn and Queens, they were like, like millions of miles away, in my mind's eye. Anyway, we we start playing. We're doing the show, and the show was very successful. Ran for at least 2.5 years, right? And playing church people and then busting people in. But while I was there, Mark is saying to me, well, man, Terry's bad, but wait till you meet this guy, Bernard Wright, right? So I remember one day he shows up with Nard. Nard might have been 12 and, big afro and everything. And he comes in and he could play piano like Donald Blackman because that was his teacher primarily. And Marcus used to babysit him, right?
Wow.
All right. So I'm playing with Marcus every day, right? And the education I got from somebody told him was a real basic one. He was like, "Well, look, man, you play 1 and 3 on your bass drum, you play 2 and 4 on your snare drum, and you play 8 notes on your hi hat." And he was like, "Don't even think about hitting a cymbal or tom unless I tell you." Right? So this went on probably about the first 4 months. And this was good for me because I was coming from, thinking I was Billy Cobham, right? So every 8 bars, I was going to try to play the biggest role humanly possible known to mankind. I was going to hit everything, chairs, plates, cymbals, anything I could find, right? But so he helped me develop my pocket playing. And then so early on, playing with Marcus, so you develop, and the band was a good band, right? But even when we were young, it used to literally drive me crazy because I would say to myself, "Man, how does this dude always know exactly what to play and when to play it?" Even back then, he had that ability, right? And it would just make my skin, crawl. I'd be like, "Damn it, he did it again. Damn it." I'd be on the bed, and we were up on this perch, behind a scrim playing for the play, right? And so that was one of the things that probably stands out in my mind most when I think about him. Everybody's, he's always been able to do the thing with his thumb and all that stuff. But his musical, I don't know, instinct or whatever you want to call it, always found the right thing to play. And consequently, after being around him and dealing with that for so many years, I was kind of like, all right, my career, a lot of it has been just doing that, trying to find that thing. You know what I mean? Not overplay, underplay, but just try to find the most wonderful thing to play at the exact time to play it. And so that would probably be my biggest takeaway from the early experiences of working with him and being around him. And then when he started putting out records, he put out one record on Warner Brothers, and it was really, because he was starting to have a lot of success as a producer. He produced early Lonnie Liston Smith records and was working doing GRP records. So he ended up getting a deal with Warner Brothers, and I can't remember the name of the record, but he was singing and stuff, right? And so he put out the record, and he said, "Hey man, I'm putting out a record, and I'm gonna call you for the hit." You know what I mean? And I remember we had a couple, maybe 1 or 2 rehearsals, but there were no gigs, right? And then he put out another record where same kind of thing, commercial record, him singing, and no, I don't remember any rehearsals for that one. And then he made a record called "The Sun Don't Lie," right?
Yep.
After, so I played on that record. There's a lot of really great musicians on that record. And then after that, we go to Japan and we play a big jazz festival. I can't remember. It was at Yomiuri Land. And they had this, big Japanese jazz festival. We had Layla Hathaway and we had Joe Sample. And I guess and I had just gotten married the first time. So this got to be like 89, somewhere around in there. And from that point on, you know, he started doing more gigs and touring and doing more records. And then there's a series of records after that. There's a record called Tales, I believe it's called. That record was primarily, I don't know if he agreed with me or not, but it was primarily just me, him, and Bernard Wright. A lot of tracks for that record. And that record stands out on my mind because I was coming back from Atlanta and I was on one of those, you be on the road, be on one of them airplane rides, and you'd be like, oh Lord, food hitting the ceiling and everything. I'm thinking the palate when I get off the plane. So I remember that one. And it just kept going, you know what I mean? And so people know the period of time of the 90s of me working with him, but we had a long history in the late, in the late 70s, you know what I mean? And it was something else, and when I look back on some of the records and things now, people, since I've been making these posts on the Facebook and stuff, people have reminded me of records that I have completely forgot about. Like there was a record called the Ozell tapes, right?
Yep, I remember that.
And yeah, and I was like, wow, the Ozell tapes, what? And I went back, I was like, oh, right, when we were in Japan. So there's like a couple of live records in Japan. The Ozell tape was an answer to, it was called the official bootleg. Somebody in Europe or someplace had got a hold of a board tape and they put out a record called Panther, right? And this is,
I remember that too, yep.
right? So it was some weird, but it was like a sound check. Somebody put out the record. So the Ozell tape was his answer to that. And I think the last record that I'm on was we did the Monaco Jazz Festival and with an orchestra, and that got recorded, and I think it might have turned into a DVD. And then we did some other kind of live kind of DVD thing when people started making their own things. We had Layla and Raphael Sadiq on it. We did that out in LA.
And you worked with Michelle as well, right?
Who?
Michelle and Degelcello.
Oh, she's on the Tales record.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure she's on. And it's real funny that's a good one too. I didn't know she was going to be on the record, and I didn't remember the song. Marcus said, "Man, check this out." I said, "What is that?"
Yeah.
He said, don't you remember?" I was like, "No, man, I have no idea." What you're playing for me right now? But I met her when she first came to New York from DC. And she worked with Lenny White, and Lenny was producing a group that actually my ex-wife is in, and it was called Voice Boxing, and it was on GRP Records. Really didn't do that well. Michelle's wonderful.
So you've been spoiled, right? How do you go?
Oh my God! With bass players, yeah.
You look for in a bass player? What's the thing that really makes you say, "Damn, this is the person," or something that makes you want to throw a shoe or a cymbal at a bass player?
Well, I like a bass player who's willing to, and this could probably be the most cliche thing as I can probably say, but I mean it in earnest. A bass player who's willing to work with me, right? So let's say you're playing a ballad, right? And it's a song that everybody knows, but you can either go boom, boom, or you go boom, boom, right? So, right?
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes.
Right? Okay. So let's say you play, I play boom, boom, right? But the bass player goes boom, boom, right? All right. Then, the next bar or whatever, I go boom, boom, right? And the bass player goes boom, boom, right? Now, right? Now, by the time we get to the third or fourth bar, right? Same thing happens again, right? It's almost like you playing that, what do you call it, paper, rock, scissors, right? So the bass player goes, boom, boom, and I go, boom, boom, right? But then by the time we get to the fourth one, everybody just says, okay, it's going to be boom, boom. And it stays that way. So I don't know, so when that usually happens, that means the people are listening to each other. They have everybody's trying to work together to make this ballad or whatever it is happen, right? No matter what kind of gig it is, stadium, concert hall, whatever, the local club. And but sometimes, you try to play this game with somebody, and no matter what you do, they just keep going boom, 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 boom. And they just are not, they're just ignoring the fact that you're trying to work with them. Now, when this happens for me, I just go, well, okay, I can see, right? Because I want the music to sound good, and I'll just play with the guy. But then it said to me, well, this brother might have a chip on his shoulder, or, he's going to show me that he's right and I'm wrong. And, it gets into a whole bunch of other stuff that don't have nothing to do with music.
Right.
So I don't necessarily want to throw a shoe or a cymbal at them. But it just is like, I'm not like spending a lot of time talking to the brother on the break.
Oh yeah,
You know
yeah,
what I mean?
I get that. You said something in a post not too long ago where you talking about the experience of getting high and how it is like when you're the only one high, you're having a very different experience than everybody else is. And
Hello.
and there was a drummer that I used to play with here in New Orleans. I haven't seen him on the scene like at all in quite some time. Nice
Mm-hmm.
enough guy, but one particular night was super frustrating, and he was asking the keyboard player for some advice, which I don't have a problem with, but I was like, you making me work real hard, so
Right.
we need to be talking. And then by the
Right.
end of the night, I said, hey man, you didn't ask me, but maybe you shouldn't smoke weed before the gig, you know. And he wanted to go into fisticuffs about this, you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but I'm like
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
hey man, ain't nobody else up here high. You high.
You know. Right. Right. Right.
You know what I'm saying? But that
Well.
but that very thing what you're talking about, that listening and being able to put your ego aside. I think when people think about ego, they think one thing is like, no, ego shows up in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And one of them is like, here's the pattern, and I really don't care what pattern we play as long as we play the same thing.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, all the pieces of the puzzle are supposed to go together. You know, if it's going to sound good. And Roberta Flack, she said that, and I don't know, I wasn't high at the time, but she said, well, people, like you said, people who smoke or drink or do something else, they're someplace else. You know what I mean? And unless you're working with musicians working with guys who are like straight but have been around people who live that type of lifestyle and are used to it, you know what I mean? They can do it. They can play with those people, you know, and they can even allow those people to lead them in a certain way. It's like, all right, let's go, you know. But other people, and especially if a person, is clearly just not present. You know what I mean? So it's one thing to be stoned or whatever, but it's another thing not to be present and being honest with the fact that you're stoned and nobody else is. And you know what I mean? For me, the worst kind of guy though to play with is the guy who drinks too much and doesn't know when he should not be drinking, and gets sloppy and stuff. So I don't know, everybody got to be, everyone's going to be who they are and they're at where they're at. But like I said in the post, you shouldn't mess up the gig for everybody else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you can drink and drive your car without running in the trees, okay. You know what I mean? But if you can't, you got to know what you can and you have to know what you can't do because it can cost you work.
Yeah.
when everything is said and done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So how that what I'm hearing you define in so many words is pocket, right?
Well, yeah, you don't want to be personally out of pocket or out of pocket on your gig.
Yeah.
I mean, especially if you're on a gig that's a halfway decent gig. I've seen people talk themselves out of gigs because of, like, drinking or smoking, but I've also seen people talk themselves out of gigs just because of their attitude. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And or showing up late, saying off cuff things that are just, it's like, yo, what's up with you, kind of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like people who go on a tour bus and or get on a tour and then get on the road, and whatever habits they have get worse. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, and watch people slowly implode.
Right. 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 Right.